Alright, so let's move on to the next shape. Now, for this shape, you can actually do this one and this one the very same way. So, I did this one for you. You must do these two on your own based upon the last video. That's the deal. So everything that's just about alike, I'm going to ask you to do it. So if you want, you would probably stop this video, do that, and please return to this video after you are done. Alright, so now let's move on to the next oddball shape that would have to have a little bit different story. This one's pretty easy, but I'm still going to do it. Create UVs, automatic mapping. Again, I go over here and just make sure all my shells are rotated the correct way. So in this case, I'm just going to rotate all of them this way. And I'll check it out to make sure that this is correct. There's no really way to tell if it's the top or bottom because there's no real way to flip these around. But you can do the edge. So if I grab the edge here, I'll see that this is the edge from the back side. These are very generic pieces. To say which one's the back and front is kind of an arbitrary statement, but we're going to treat this as the front and this is the back of these pieces. Okay, so for the front I always try to keep the maximum attached to it. So Control to shell, W on the keyboard, and move it. I'm going to show you a different way to move these around. It's this button right here. So move shell tool. If I click on it, notice it automatically highlights the shell and allows me to move it around. The disadvantages of this is I must go over to this move tool in order to do anything. So case in point, if I go here and click here, if I go to edge, it won't let me. And it's very, very buggy. As you can see, fatal error attempting to save and and usually it just crashes out. Just like that. So make sure that when you're using that tool that you know that there's quite some errors with it. It's always been that way. It's a Maya thing. And I'm going to be pointing out as many bugs as I can so you know that what crashes Maya half the time and how to fix it. So that's my job. Alright, so I'm just going to open that back up and start the next piece. So you can see that I should be saving at all times. There's a file format called MA and there's an MB. So Maya ASCII and Maya binary. In this case, in this class, we're going to be using the Maya binary. The Maya ASCII is completely bugged. It will crash on you and it will cause some havoc with your system. Oops, these are the ones that are already done. So let's open the ones that aren't done. In this case, I got sent all the way back to the very beginning. But that's okay. So this is just kind of review. So let me catch up and then I'll continue on with the lesson. And you can assign it to default or color, doesn't really matter. And I'm only concentrating on this piece right here. These three you're going to do. I'll do this one, you do that one. Alright, so there we go. Again, create UVs, automatic mapping. Now, as I said, you might want to save this as an MB file. So save scene as and make sure it is MB. I'm going to label this video 3 for my own records and make sure it's binary. Cool. Now I should be safe. Window UV texture editor. So now you know why I don't use this tool very often, in case you've read about it and used it before. Alright, cool. So it looks like I'm going to rotate these pieces all this way. Then I find my front. So my front is this shell right here. So I highlight one UV here. It's going to be really tricky because I got to go down here to highlight it. And I usually move my front piece off to the side so I can work on it and then attach my little pieces to it. Moving so. So it's very easy. The concept's very easy. It's just navigation that really hangs up the student. There's no doubt about it. So in this case, I have this face. This is on the top. That is correct. And I'm just going to be moving this back under here, grabbing both shells and move them onto the 0 and 1. Alright, so I did that piece. That piece and this piece looks about the same, so I need you to do that piece. Alright, let's go on to something else. This piece right here is kind of tricky because it's an angle. Our other ones were a perfect square. Has anything changed within the workflow? Well, let's do the automatic mapping. Let's assign that material to it. Now, here's another way to do that. So right click, assign existing material, and look at UV texture. So that's another way to do it. There's so many different ways to do things within Maya that it becomes a very arduous task for many students to learn Maya because there's just so many ways to do something within Maya. It all equals out to the same answer. It's a correct answer. Alright, so I highlighted this edge. I found that that is my back shell, and this is my front shell. So this is the one I'm going to concentrate on first. And again, I like to flip these around so they are just like they are on the mesh. W on the keyboard to move this around. Okay. In this case, this piece right here, if I rotated this around and then flipped it, it would give me the same shape on the other side. Now, there is a flipped shell. Like there is a negative U and a V. So if we look at this for a second, I always use this button right here. You can see that this turned red. Now red indicates that we're going to have some problems later on if we ever unfolded geometry when it's red. So this is a negative shell, I call it. So we want to try to avoid negative shells as much as possible. So in this case, if I flip it back, I get a positive shell. So that's another rule. We try to keep away from negative shells. Alright, so let's grab this edge and move and sew it. Perfect. That's a completed part. I always try to keep the back and front separate shells for a reason. They are just two different things altogether, and it's just an easier workflow as far as texturing is concerned. So that's why I don't join these two together, because I like to keep them upright. I'm going to move them back onto the 0 and 1, and I notice I scaled them uniformly. Okay, so this is called uniform scale. Anytime that I scale them ununiformed, things happen where the squares no longer become squares. So we have to keep these uniformed as possible. That means keeping these as square as possible. If I go like this, they even become more square, and that's good. Okay, so that's another thing. Try to keep all the checkers uniformed. Alright, so that's the difference between this piece and all the other pieces, is you had to scale it just a little bit to get them all uniform. Alright, so we have quite a few here already done. That one's a very unique piece. Before you go on to the next ones, please have all of these done. Alright, move on to the next video.